Thank you very much for joining us. I'm excited to get things underway. So for those of you who don't know me, you may know my name just from the emails. My name is Travis Brown. I am the account manager, tactical projects leader here at Maestro. I'm kind of the, we'll say, main point of interface for so many of you. Just in scrolling through the names in the chat window, I already know a lot of the names and associate those with a lot of the communities. So I do consider myself fortunate to know several of you, but there's a few that I don't. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Travis Brown. Prior to joining the team here at Rakusic, which is the company that has created Maestro, I was actually an executive director in Quincy, Illinois. So I spent 6.5, 7 years as the executive director here in Quincy before joining the team here. And the very first thing that I got asked was, do you have any ideas? And the next thing you know, we're building Maestro. And from there, the snowball has just continued to roll downhill, which has been absolutely phenomenal. Love working with Main Streets, and anytime we get to come together like this is always a great thing. So speaking of, a little bit about the town hall, what this is, why we do it. I see a lot of new names to our town hall in our chat, which is absolutely phenomenal. We do these about 3 times a year. We try to do quarterly. We understand that fourth quarter is really busy with events and planning and everything else. And so we tend to not do one in the fourth quarter unless absolutely necessary. But for us, it's a great way to kind of keep everybody in the loop with what's going on. We always want to interact with our communities as much as possible. Not just when there's a problem or just when you need assistance. We want to be there to help whenever necessary, certainly, but we like the ability to interact with you guys, talk about downtown issues, talk about things that you're facing. And this has proven to be a pretty good opportunity for us to do that. So we're really excited about having so many people here. Kind of gives us an opportunity to tell you what we've got going on, hear from you what you'd like us to have going on. And we always try to touch on a subject which I think has brought many of you to the table today, which is parking, which we'll get to here in a minute. Couple housekeeping items. If you haven't noticed, your phone lines are muted. We do that just to kind of keep things rolling, but if you have questions, I really encourage you to use the chat feature here. We'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. Towards the end, we'll give everybody an opportunity to unmute their mic if you'd like and ask questions that way. Certainly during Jay's presentation as well, I would assume. But keeping that chat questions just kind of keeps us moving and keeps things rolling smoothly. If you wanted to share this with somebody, you hear something that really connects with you and you want to share this with colleagues, we will make this recording available to everyone. Probably tomorrow, maybe Thursday, by the time we get done editing everything, downloading all that good stuff. So we will have that to you. It'll be later this week. The other thing we want to know is what you thought of this. We want your honest feedback. It's always important to understand how we're serving our communities. And so when you get that video, you'll also have an opportunity to take our survey. We would really love to hear from you what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what topics you want to see us cover in the future. I think you guys all understand we're trying to reach out and talk about things that aren't just specific to Maestro, but we want to make sure that those topics that we are reaching on are things that are relevant to you. So please take some time, fill out that survey, and let us know how we can continue to help you. With that said, I want to talk on the Maestro stuff about some of the things that we've got cooking. Some of the things that we've recently released, some of the things that we've got in the pipeline, so to speak. So let's dive in. I want to talk really briefly about our recent releases. So hopefully you all noticed that we now have an iPhone and an Android app. I don't think we've been keeping that a secret. Hopefully you've noticed. If not, this is your announcement. But this is another way for you to kind of take Maestro on the go. Certainly it's a responsive website before, but responsive websites still are innately a little clunky when you're trying to mobile do things on the go. And so we created those mobile apps. It doesn't do all of the features. You know, you're not going to be able to input a lot of community settings or input data or do a lot of the reporting from the app. What it will let you do though is edit on the go, which is the biggest thing. So if you're standing in front of a business and you need to take a picture, update hours, do any of that type of stuff, you're certainly going to be able to do that. If you're at a committee meeting and you need to assign tasks to people, absolutely do that. So it's a great way for you guys to kind of do that stuff that we heard from a lot of you. You were waiting until you got back to the office to do. Hopefully this makes it a little easier to do it then and there, so to speak, and kind of keep things rolling that way. Just here very recently, about a month and a half ago, which seems crazy with all of the COVID stuff that's been going on. But if you haven't noticed, we did release something that we've called volunteer opportunities. If anyone's familiar with Sign Up Genius, this is that same functionality within the Maestro system. So what this does is it allows you to create an event. Let's say you've got a weekend festival. You can create all of the different shifts. This date, you know, maybe you've got a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday event. You can put the different dates and the different times of your shifts. Once you've set that, now you can go in, add your jobs. So maybe you need somebody at the gate, somebody handling prizes, somebody doing this, somebody doing that. And then you can assign how many of those jobs get slotted for each shift. Some of them may not be, you know, your setup crew is only going to be on the setup shift. You're not going to need them throughout the day. Same thing with your cleanup. Everything else may be all those middle shifts, but you may need 5 people for the gate, you know, or let's say a concession stand in the afternoon, and then in the evening when you're planning on having more people, you need a lot more bodies, and so you might double that number. This allows you to do all of that, and then you send one link out to your community. They can sign up for shifts. If they're not in your Maestro system, it's going to add them to your Maestro system. And then the really nice feature is once that's all said and done, your event's over with, you can come back in and with a click of a button, add all of those volunteer hours to those profiles. So again, as you get to the end of the month, you're filling out your volunteer hours. Everything's already in there for you. It makes just so much easier to get what you need as far as reporting up to your coordinating programs or to your city councils or to your boards right there at your fingertips. Of course, that came with many, many, many other features. Probably the one that I think was the most requested. Businesses can now own properties. We've kind of shifted how those profiles work. So businesses can now own a property, which is great, has really helped us streamline some things. And so we're really excited about where we've come and excited here in a minute or two to tell you about where we're headed. If you haven't heard of our Maestro Masters program, I can't blame you. This is not something that we've publicized a whole lot. We tried to start it last fall, let's say, last summer, fall, and then all of a sudden, COVID hit. And so we kind of put this on the back burner. But as things are looking to the future, we know eventually things are going to get back to some semblance of normal, whatever that really looks like. This is a program that really, because we've grown to the point where we've got some amazing communities and some really raving fans, we want to be able to help you guys out and help connect you to people in your region that are using the system. So what we're going to start doing, probably with this fourth quarter actually, is holding some special Maestro Masters trainings. Those will be unique and specific just to our masters. So the people that have been with us for at least 6 months. That's our only real requirement. You have to be using the system for at least 6 months. Once you hit that deadline or that timeline, you're in, as long as you want to be. When we get back to having conferences, we're going to be hosting special receptions. We've also done boot camps. I know just from looking at the names, there's been a few of you that have attended some of those boot camps. Certainly when we go out to do those again, we're going to look regionally and look to our masters communities to be the host locations for that. And we want to highlight you. You know, we know that we built a software for Main Street communities, but just like you guys highlight your businesses and your districts, we want to highlight our communities because we think that we've got a great program. We hope that you agree, but so much of that, of our success comes from hearing your success stories. And so we want to make sure that we're highlighting you and what you guys are doing. And in return, what we ask for is a testimonial. We do love videos, but any testimonial will be great. Just something that we can kind of share with other people, because I can sit and talk to somebody and tell them Maestro is great all day. But if the people using it day in and day out are the ones saying, this is really a solid piece of software, that certainly carries a lot of weight. We have directed some folks to people in their region, especially as we got more Maestro Masters. You know, when people say, hey, I'd like to talk to somebody using this, we just ask that we can send some of those questions your way. And then obviously, you know, tell people about us. If you've gotten to this point and you're going to be a Maestro Master, we're hoping that you're at least pretty fond of the software. When you're at conferences or opportunities come up, we encourage you to tell people about us, because we want to grow our network. We want to be able to have as many people using this software as possible, so that when we do things like this town hall, we've got a bigger network to bring into the fold, so to speak. The other thing I want to talk about is what's coming, because we've got some exciting things on the horizon, at least from our standpoint. Certainly, I don't know exactly what everything's going to look like yet. We're still kind of nailing down schedules and specifics and details. So I can't say in X amount of months or X amount of days that you're going to have this, but where we are headed next, I think, is an overhaul or a revamp a little bit of our reporting and advanced search. We've really been adding a lot of features and a lot of different elements to Maestro. We need to kind of take some time and make sure that that reporting and advanced search is working as seamlessly as possible for everybody. So I think that's kind of where we're looking at the moment. But again, there's always little things that come up. And I'll be honest, a lot of our building and new features and new benefits comes from you guys as Maestro community. So if you've got ideas, you've got suggestions, I would strongly encourage you to send those our way. It's always great when we get those, and I can promise you we talk about every single one. So that's enough about Travis and about Maestro, because I think with all of you coming, you guys are here to talk about parking. And certainly we've got somebody that knows parking and knows downtowns, and I was so stoked to be able to collaborate and partner with Jay. Jay Schlinsog is the owner of Downtown Professionals Network and creator of Reopen Main Street. He has 30 years of experience in the community and economic development, serving both as an executive director with organizations in Idaho, Illinois, Washington, and Wisconsin, and for the past 20 years as the principal with Downtown Professionals Network, a collaborative for leading advocates and practitioners who specialize in solutions for community, downtown, and business district economic development, redevelopment, and revitalization. That is a mouthful, and if anybody's ever had the privilege of knowing Jay or just being familiar with the Downtown Professionals Network, you know that that's an undersell by far. There is an absolute reason that Jay is considered one of the leaders in our industry. And so when I reached out to him, it was kind of a long shot. I was so stoked that he was willing to kind of help us out and talk about parking, because he's somebody that I have admired from afar for a while, and really excited to have him here and share his knowledge of parking and just downtowns in general. Jay is a phenomenal resource, and we're excited to have him. So I may have to unmute him. So with that, we'll get into parking, and I will kind of turn the reins over to Jay here and let him take the lead.
Thank you, Travis. Wow, what an introduction. I couldn't have written that better myself. Hey, I am thrilled to join you all. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the Continental Divide. I have to, in full disclosure, share with you the same thing that I shared with Travis during that phone call. I do not consider myself a parking expert. I have some strong feelings about parking and be willing to share those, but moreover, just want to share with you some of what I've learned over 30 plus years of doing Main Street and district revitalization work, and having had the privilege of working alongside some renowned planners and engineers in the field. So kind of funny too, because initially when I talked with Travis, he said, you know, got about 20, 25 minutes. And I thought, how am I going to fill up 20 or 25 minutes with parking? And as it turns out, I found out I have a whole lot more to say about parking than I thought. So there was actually some content that is still on the cutting room floor as we dive in. That said, we're just going to go rather rapid fire and share some ideas and thoughts, not to overwhelm. The hope, though, is that perhaps you'll be able to find some inspiration along the way, or perhaps even mine a nugget or two that you can apply in your own district. So yes, warning, we are going to talk about that P word, and by now you all know what the P word is. Kind of funny, when we're on site working as a team, oftentimes we even have a contest trying to see how long is it before in a community, before the P word comes up. Invariably, it comes up pretty quickly. So parking problems, yes, my guess is you probably have them. Now, I hope your parking problems don't look something like this, or even like this, or like this. But it could be that every now and then, maybe you encounter something like this. No, that is not a drive-through window, and this is pre-COVID. This is not one of those pickup kind of services. When you run across something like this, my guess is maybe you wish, like me, that you had one of these cards in your pocket that you could just pull out and leave on the windshield and leave a message. Nonetheless, as we do think about problems, that parking problem, I always encourage to give some thought to what is that problem? Is it a management problem or a supply problem? See, in the course of the conversation, when it begins, the tendency is for everyone to jump to that supply side of the equation. My guess is most of you have never heard this in your communities, right? We need more parking. And of course, I'm being facetious. That seems to be a common ring. And when I hear that, of course, I might be in the room and I'm visualizing something like this or like this. And so I begin to think, wow, I'm just glad that I actually found a parking spot while I was here. And how did that happen? So the reality is, or the truth is, it's somewhere between perception and reality that parking exists. One of the things that, of course, I'm a big fan of is data, and I see a couple of faces and names that I recognize, and they know I am considered the data geek, and I am all about data. But when it comes to parking, yes, data is part of the equation, but one of the things that I've taken to doing, especially in those communities where I hear this echoing, we need more parking, is just getting the camera out. And if you want to be powerful, if you want to really capture the true condition, the true state of parking, just get out with your camera and start taking some photos. Now, these photos come from 3 different communities where we heard that resounding echo of we need more parking. I always try to be fair and get out at different times of the day. And try to stay within about a 2-block radius of the main street or the downtown core. It's not unusual to find this. And so it really does then lead to that question of what is the problem? Yeah, all these photos, again, different times of the day, we need more parking. So what is the problem? Where I would encourage you and everyone to start is on that management side, because most often what we find is that the problem isn't so much in supply, but in management and how we're using that valuable resource. And if you will, as we think about management and that valuable resource, it sometimes comes down to competition. It's not so much supply, it's that, yes, we have parking, it's all located in the wrong place. And there's competition for these prime spaces. Now, I'm sure this is not the case in any of your communities, but would you believe that in some communities, some of these vehicles might belong to business owners and employees working in those businesses? I know, shocking, right? Yeah, it happens. And so in terms of a place to start, let's start there. And it's really incumbent on you and the organization to lead that discussion. So I went deep, deep, deep in the archives. That warning that you saw earlier actually came from an idea that we had way back when in St. Charles, Illinois. And, you know, I could reset this, but I used this scan with that vintage colored mailing sticker on there for a reason. This goes all the way back to like 95 or 96, but yet it's still relevant. And this was effective in beginning that conversation and to a certain extent exerting some peer pressure on those that were trying to circumvent the system. And we even dived into things like, okay, so you're a service business and that impromptu walk-in traffic doesn't matter to you, right? So this doesn't matter. No, it does. And what I will be doing is sharing this document with Travis so that anyone that might like a copy of this certainly could have access to it. But it was a good way to begin the conversation. This was originally produced as a mailer, and it was mailed to every business owner in our district. And yeah, it got some attention. We had a few of our parking and traffic committee members that actually took to leaving on windshields as well. And peer pressure when it comes to parking can be very effective in a downtown district. So whether it's something like that brochure that we did, or even a simple card like this, I think it's important to put our neighbors and our fellow members on notice that indeed we do notice. And a winning approach means that we're all working together. And so, yeah, peer pressure can be pretty good. Along that same line, though, it's not good enough to simply tell business owners and employees you can't park there. Really encourage you to show them where they can park, show them where to go. And it's not unusual, oftentimes, that it may be a Main Street reconstruction project or a bridge project like the one in Batavia, Illinois years ago that prompted this meaningful exploration and identification of those areas that were appropriate for employee parking and actually plotting that on a map. And that's a good place to start. And perhaps that could even begin to evolve into something like they've done in Danville, California, where it's a much more slick system, if you will, but very effective in identifying those areas that are appropriate for employee parking and making it easy for employees to access those areas and be able to park without concern of getting tickets or getting towed. Another important piece of that management equation is the messaging, and really encourage you to manage that message. Now, again, I'm all about the data, and this is a slice of a survey that was done just about a year ago, I believe, in one of our communities. it's not unusual at all to see something like this. So this is done as an open-ended question. We ask, what is the first thing you would do to improve downtown? And we include this in both the consumer survey and the business survey. Open-ended, so folks can write in anything they want. So check this out. When it came to consumers, you can see number 1, adding and recruiting businesses, diversifying the mix. Way down here at number 6, 6.1% is parking. But look at that column next to it from the business survey. Ask them the same question, and it actually tied as the number 1 response at 20.7%. See, for me, this is a red flag. And it kind of goes to this, I guess the simplest way of saying it is if you say something loud enough and say it enough times, people will begin to believe it. And if our business owners are telling people that parking sucks, people are going to begin to believe it. So to that extent, again, our businesses, our employees, in many ways could be their own worst enemies. What I would encourage you in terms of managing that message is take a positive approach and promote that as an asset. This is also vintage. It comes from Athens, Alabama. And I think I saw Terry's name online. So shout out to Athens, Alabama today. But just a great way to promote the fact that, hey, we have free parking. As a matter of fact, we have 952 free spaces in downtown Athens. And here's a more contemporary take on it that comes from Royal Oak, Michigan. And what I love is it's just so clean, and yet it identifies all of those public parking areas, all of those having free 2-hour parking, and even identifies the different ways that users can pay for parking, as well as the number of spaces in each of those areas. Also love what they did in Wausau, Wisconsin. They actually put together a couple of quick little YouTube videos that I think are worth the time sharing with you here today. So this first one, as you can see, is on street parking. And to go along with that, the companion video for lots and ramps. So props to the crew in Wausau, Blake and the crew in Wausau. Just a really great way of, again, promoting that asset. And I love how they've used the stress-free parking in downtown Wausau message there. Along with that, I like to think that signs are a good thing. Certainly they can be good things. And part of the issue that we find in many of the communities we work is that people have a difficult time finding parking. One more recent community that we worked in, Randy Wilson and I actually ventured out, took a good chunk of a day trying to find a parking direction sign. We found one. Here it is. And even at that, we were having a difficult time trying to determine exactly where it was pointing us. Nonetheless, don't forget that, especially for the visitors, anything that you can do to help them find parking is a good thing. And maybe it's the traditional signage. Ideally, parking would also be incorporated as part of a more comprehensive wayfinding system. And do be sure that you're clearly signing the lots themselves as public parking areas. And when it comes to signs, be obvious and be clear. Now, if we had more time today, I could tell you about the occasion when the publisher of a newspaper in one of the towns where I was a director was towed. And it was a good lesson on a couple of levels. Number one, you never want that to happen to someone that buys ink by the barrel, because it became a big deal. Number two, it certainly did reinforce the need for in both public and private lots to try to be very clear in terms of what was allowed or where those there could be consequences for parking as well. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Simple signage like this is very effective, as well as this new signage that was developed in Atlanta. Be clear, be concise, and identify those areas. From a design perspective, what I would also encourage you to do is when you have a chance, go out, take a walk around, and take a look at your parking areas through perhaps a different lens. And keep in mind that those parking lots are oftentimes the first interaction that visitors have with your district. So ask yourselves, as you're looking through that lens, what are those parking areas saying about you and saying about the district? We're going to get back to that lonely bike there in a few moments. But what I would encourage is set the tone. And it was actually Michael Schroeder, a landscape architect, who first introduced me to the idea of using those parking areas to make that first impression. And it can be as simple as a welcome, or perhaps it's something branded especially for you in your own brand of welcome, like we find at Unclaimed Baggage. Michael was also the first that I think really opened my eyes to this idea of parking gardens. Parking lots should not be a place just to store cars, but they can set a good first impression and set the tone for that visitor's experience as you begin to introduce many of the same kinds of elements that you would as part of your streetscape. That might even include sidewalks to protect the pedestrian, remembering that immediately upon parking a vehicle and stepping out of that vehicle, the motorist becomes the pedestrian. So be thinking about those pedestrian-oriented amenities as part of your parking lots. And again, think about how the streetscape can even extend into those parking lots or begin that experience with different edge kinds of treatments and even furnishings that help complement the visit to the district. And it's okay to be whimsical as well. Have a little bit of fun with it. Art, even on the surface, can just help to certainly set the tone and invite folks to want to explore more of what your district has to offer. And it could be that the type of art that you're doing might even inspire some more organic art. I had to include this. As you're looking at that, admit it, you would love to do this every time that you see someone doing this in one of your parking areas. And think of it as a chance to think of those parking areas as a chance to make places. And it kind of builds on some of those streetscape elements, even in terms of the different gateways that might invite folks in. Maybe it's coverings. Coverings are much more efficient, cost efficient than this idea of building more surface parking. Take a look at those areas, those surface parking areas that you already have and perhaps maybe underutilized, and think about how a cover might help welcome and invite folks to use it, but could also double then as an event venue. And even simple art and thinking about the surroundings and framing these areas as parks. Here, even using the bollards with some art as an extension, providing a nice warm welcome, and really showing off some of those features of the community that help distinguish you. This can be really important too as you think about parking areas that might be located behind buildings, which is not unusual at all, in identifying those different businesses, those different attractions and places in a colorful and whimsical way. Now back to that lonely bike. Just a quick note on that. As you are thinking about parking and accommodating cars, would just encourage you to also think about accommodating the different modes of transportation. Things like bicycles, those are good things. For every 1 or 2 bicycles, that's 1 less vehicle in our district. And it does provide ways for a lot of different users to experience and navigate our districts. Portland is one in particular that has really done a great job in accommodating bicycles with their bicycle parking corrals and even mapping those for those avid bicyclers that are planning their routes. Remember too that sharing is caring, not unusual at all. Churches are not the only ones, but it's not unusual to find churches as part of our districts, and they have their own parking areas oftentimes that are reserved for their use. Again, it's not just churches. There are all kinds of different uses that might have their own private areas that perhaps are used on weekends or used from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So do be thinking about where there might be shared parking opportunities. In a lot of our districts, especially as that eating, drinking, and entertainment niche is evolving, it may be that your peak demand for parking is actually after 5 o'clock. So perhaps there are some shared opportunities. When you're doing that, sharing and partnerships mean that there is give and take. And so do be thinking, might there be opportunities as part of a sharing agreement to also offer some help with some landscaping or some buffering at the edges of those parking areas, even perhaps resealing or restriping those parking areas as part of that agreement. Yes, as Travis alluded to, we still are in the midst of COVID-19. So just want to share with you a couple of thoughts that are particularly relevant to the time. And it goes back to closer to the starting point in talking about how business owners and employees need to be part of that winning solution to parking in our districts. And it's going to sound like every other commercial that you hear, but if ever there was a time to promote customer-friendly parking practices, it's now. And that competition for those prime parking spaces is going to become even more intense, especially as we begin to approach the cold weather months in some of our northern states, and for that matter, even some of our southern states. The competition will become even more fierce as we think about how to continue accommodating things like curbside pickup and parklets that might be part of the streetscape. So it's important that you're having those discussions now, and especially for our northern friends that are looking at the cold and snow setting in a relatively short time. Be working now with your local government leaders to think about how those spaces can be used and continue to be used and maintained throughout the coming winter months. Quick plug, if you're still looking for different ideas and direction in terms of how to navigate this new reality, would certainly invite you to visit us at reopenmainstreet.com. You'll find more than 100 different ideas there. And yes, we do have some things in the work to update that for the winter season upon us. Finally, as you are going about planning and thinking about parking in your own district, just keep in mind, one size doesn't fit all. It would be wonderful if we could just simply take the parking management plan from one of the communities down the road and apply it to your own. Chances are it won't work. What I would encourage is that you continue to assess, to examine, and experiment with different time limits, different configurations, different types of enforcement. There are a lot of new ways of enforcing parking that certainly borrow on the kind of technology that wasn't available way back when I was a director. And so as you are thinking about how to fully utilize, best utilize that valuable resource that is parking, think about all of those different tactics that are available to you, and certainly engage the stakeholders, engage the users, and work closely with local government so that ultimately those different changes and even those experiments that you might be trying on along the way can be readily implemented. And be very clear, make a real effort to get out ahead and communicate, promote, publicize the different changes that you're making or the experiments that you're using to best utilize that valuable resource. And finally, I love this from Jeff Siegler at Revitalize or Die. Do think about parking and how parking is much like restaurant seating, if you will. Not everyone is a big fan in communities when I tell them that indeed we are in the business of creating parking problems. The fact of the matter is, if you're dealing with parking problems, it probably means that you've reached a level of success that many of our districts aspire for. Now, that being said, there is always room for improvement in terms of management. And I hope some of the ideas that we were able to share here in our short time today might inspire some ideas or perhaps a new way of looking. And do be thinking too in terms of how can we, as we navigate this new reality, accommodate all of the different users and uses that are part of our vibrant districts. So with that, I think, Travis, I am ready to turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Well, while people start to type their questions in for Jay, I just want to share my parking story here. So when I was an executive director, we had, like everybody, the businesses that wouldn't necessarily comply. And one of them was very upset about the farmers market. You know, they're taking up all of this space this morning. And so what I did is, similar to Jay, I used the data approach. And I figured up exactly how many stall hours he was open that we were taking up versus how many stall hours he and his employee that parked out in front of his store every day were taking up. And as it turns out, the 2 hours that the farmer's market and his store overlapped weren't nearly as much as him and his employee taking up 2 spots every day. And it was that conversation and that little, pushback on him that actually changed his behavior. And he actually started parking around back. It was more of a pain for him, but he realized that there was some validity to that argument. So I would encourage you to use data as much as possible. I will tell you, I've been in a number of communities and I've been to a lot of events, and I've never heard anybody complain about parking at a big event, right? If it's something that is worth going to, people will park and they will walk. It's that day-to-day stuff. And that's where we've just got to, again, flip that script and flip the narrative. I'm glad I see Tracy in here because she is one that I've actually been in a district Out of all of my travels, I've actually been to one that had a legitimate parking problem. Ocean Beach, California, beautiful. If you haven't gotten the opportunity, I highly encourage a vacation. But they're kind of landlocked. They've got the ocean on one side, full occupancy, not big. They don't really have big parking lots anywhere. It's almost like, you know, wall to wall businesses and wall to wall, you know, residents. So really, they have such a high density of both residents and businesses that they're pretty well active, almost 24 hours a day, which is phenomenal. But it actually does lead to some parking issues and residents versus businesses. But everybody else, I think we're all in the same boat, that we probably, if we're honest, have more of a perception problem than an actual parking problem. As Jay mentioned, our goal is to create those. I haven't seen any come up, but I did have a question that I will ask Jay. So one thing you didn't talk about much that I would just kind of be curious about is enforcement, and where you see the enforcement role in parking versus, you know, the free parking.
Well, you know, what would be wonderful is if everyone played nice, we wouldn't need enforcement, right? That is, if all of our business owners and employees were parking in areas that allowed for the most convenient spaces to be maintained for our visitors and customers, we wouldn't need enforcement. That being said, I think that just time and experience has proven that enforcement is part of the management strategy. And so I didn't mention it specifically, but I would encourage, as you think about enforcement on a couple of different levels. Number one, just remember that, again, there's no one size fits all. Street parking, though, in general, you probably want to stay in a 2 or 3 hour time limit. Again, with this idea that we want to create turnover, because like the restaurant, that turnover means more people, more dollars flowing through. At the same time, and especially in some of your public lots and in those lots that might be targeted for employee parking, you obviously need some 8 hour or 10 hour parking. There are also places for loading zones. There are places for 10-minute and 15-minute parking at those different business types that have a lot of carry-out kind of traffic. So it is a good reminder too that the same management system that was put in place, an enforcement system 10 or 15 years ago, may not be relevant to the business district today and the way that the mix has evolved. So it's always good to reassess at least every year to 18 months how the system is working and what changes might need to be made, both in terms of management and the related enforcement of that system. Did that answer your question, Travis?
It did, and we actually have another enforcement question. Shannon wrote in. She says, right now we have little to no enforcement in outdated loading areas. Welcome to Quincy. Next year, the detour of a bike lane will reconfigure parking, and even though the actual loss of spaces is only about 2 to 4, the perception will be that the bikers took away the parking, because there will be more enforcement now due to new meters and pay stations. So her question is, should she encourage the city to start enforcing more now as a way to pre-mitigate next year's issues?
Yes, I think that would be a good approach. It's those dang bikers, messing everything up. Yes, I think that that could be a good approach. You know, one of the challenges, and I don't know the situation there, I think one of the challenges as we move forward, and it is directly related to COVID, is that I'm hearing from more and more communities that even when it comes to snow removal in some of our northern states, the budget just isn't there to do snow removal. And so we have communities struggling with how does snow removal get done in some of our districts. And I think the same could be true when it comes to enforcement in the near term and perhaps even in the longer term, because I think I'm pretty accurate when I say that in probably 90% plus of our communities, parking enforcement is not a moneymaker. It's a money loser. So I know that that's not a great answer to the question. I do like the idea, to the extent practicable, to begin enforcing those changes now, ahead of those additional changes that are coming because of those dang bikers. But it's also probably another good opportunity to have that conversation with the business owners and say, hey, to make this work, we're going to all need to play nice together.
Absolutely. And if you've got time, think about different ways, just to kind of piggyback on that you can lean into the new bike lane, and maybe there's contests or promotions that you can do to, you know, get more business owners to ride the bikes themselves. You know, again, lessening the burden for vehicular traffic. If there's things that you can do to lean into that.
Absolutely.
If there's other questions, oh, Shannon writes back in just for our viewing audience at home here. P.S. Our businesses are 100% on board with the bike lane. It's a public issue. Fantastic. If your businesses are on board, my assumption will be that the public perception will fade pretty quickly.
I would tend to believe. I think I just heard the angels singing a big old hallelujah from above. That's amazing. Congratulations, Shannon.
Terrific. Again, I know we're coming up on noon here. I'm not in a rush. We can stick around and take a couple of more questions. If people have it, I will, you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you. If you'd rather ask that way, put it in the chat. Again, I want to thank everybody for giving up their time. I really want to thank Jay for a fantastic presentation. I know I said it in the introduction, but there's certainly a reason you're considered one of our industry leaders, and just very evident by everything you're sharing with us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Travis. Very kind.
So again, stick around if anybody's got questions, but I know people have to get hopping. Some of you are getting done with lunch. Some of you are needing to get to lunch. So feel free to kind of duck out. But if you've got other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat window or unmute yourself and ask away. Nobody? They're starting to drop out. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. We will get the recording of this done, put up later this week, and shared with everyone. Certainly encourage you to fill out that survey, and certainly we'll share the document from Jay as well. But really appreciate everybody's time, and more importantly, really appreciate you being a part of our Maestro community. I mentioned before, but our success really comes with your success. And so we are very appreciative that you've entrusted us with your data. And if there's things that we can do to help you along the way, please do not hesitate to reach out and let us know. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.